We're going to be looking at Obadiah. We're going to be looking at the book of Obadiah. It's the shortest book in the Old Testament. It's only 21 verses. It's the fourth of the minor prophets. And as far as who wrote the book, we really don't know. And when I say that, the guy, Obadiah, wrote the book, obviously. But there's 13 Obadiahs in the Old Testament. And there's no real good reason to associate him with any of the ones that are named, although people try from time to time. I guess one of the most prominent ones is the servant of Ahab in 1 Kings 18. Some people associate him with this prophet. So Obadiah means worshiper of the Lord, or Yahweh. And so another thing to think about is the date that it was written. There are two prominent dates that are given, although there are many dates that range in a time span of about 600 years. But the two main dates that we deal with are 848 to 850 and, 848 to 844 BC, when the Philistines and Arabs partially destroyed Jerusalem in the days of King Jehoram. 2 Chronicles 21, verse 5 and 8 through 11. Another prominent date that is given is 587 to 586, sometime before then, when the Babylonians invaded Jerusalem. And remember that is a three-stage deal. The Babylonians first came in 597. They carried away three prominent, four: Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who became servants in Nebuchadnezzar's court. 587 to 586, the city is destroyed. But in 605 BC, that was the first one, when Daniel and his companions were carried away to Babylon. And then in 597, Ezekiel goes to Babylon and with other people, but that's just a way of thinking about it. And in 587 to 586, the city is destroyed. Other passages to consider when you're thinking about the book of Obadiah is Jeremiah 49, verses 7 through 13, and Psalm 137. There's also a passage in Ezekiel 25, that the language is very similar to what you read in Obadiah. The language is very similar. So, why? Why is this nation under condemnation? So we read the vision of Obadiah. Thus says the Lord concerning Edom, we have heard a report from the Lord. and a messenger has been sent among the nations. Rise up, let us rise up against it in battle. I will surely make you the least among the nations. You will be utterly destroyed. Your proud heart has deceived you. You live in the clefts of the rock, whose dwelling is in the heights. You say in your heart, who will bring me down to the ground? Though you soar aloft like the eagle, though your nest is set among the stars, from there I will bring you down, says the Lord. So in this first section of the book, their problem is their pride. And as you continue to read on, their pride here is where they live. They live in the mountains. They live in Seir. They live in a very narrow pass that's difficult to get to. It can be easily defended against a great army that's coming, well, very few could defend it. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Remember the city, the rock city in there? That's from a time period later, but that is where Edom was. Modern day Jordan. So, their pride gets them in trouble. But what does this have to do with Israel? What does this have to do with Judah? And it's a great big feud that goes back thousands of years. There's the historical relationship between Israel, Edom. Both nations shared the common ancestry of Abraham. Isaac was the father of Esau. Isaac was the father of Jacob. Chapter 25 of Genesis. The conflict between the brothers becomes characteristic of the conflict between the nations. Esau was the more likable character. I don't like Jacob. He's a whiny brat. And I don't see that he ever changed much in his whole life. But he did have this one thing going for him. He was interested in the spiritual blessings that were promised to Abraham. Esau was not. Esau traded that right away for a bowl of bean soup. He traded the birthright away. This begins before they are even born. There is a struggle in the womb, and Rebecca goes to God and asks, "What is all this about?" And he says, "There are two nations there, and the older one will serve the younger one." So there's the first of it. At the birth, Esau is born first, but Jacob comes out grabbing his heel. And Esau is named Esau because he's red. He's hairy. And Jacob is named Jacob because he is grasping the heel of his brother Esau. We've already talked about Esau selling his birthright for a bowl of red stew. Then Jacob steals the blessing. Jacob was the favorite of Rebekah. Esau was the favorite of Isaac. Isaac thinks he's going to die soon, and he wants to bless his favorite son before he dies. He says, go hunt, come back with meal, we'll eat, and I'll bless you. Rebekah and Jacob overhear the conversation, or at least Rebekah does, and she says, hey, I've got this plan. You go get a goat, I'll dress you in the skins of the goat, and I'll cook the goat the way your father likes it, and you go get the blessing. Well, that's the way it happened. And Esau, when he shows up, he wants a blessing too, and he doesn't get the promised blessing that he would have gotten, but he is blessed. And he plans on killing Jacob. But Jacob goes and spends time with his uncle Laban, which Jacob meets his match with Uncle Laban. Really does. So when he returns, there is a tense reunion, reconciliation, somewhat. Although they separate, Jacob lives in Canaan, Esau in Mount Seir. And you got to kind of think about the red sandstone off Mount Seir, the territory, red, and that plays a role in our thoughts of Edom. Okay, so the mountain area is where they live. The conflict continues with the nations. They separated, the nations were formed. The conflict starts in Numbers 28 when the Israelites are coming out of Egypt. After the 40-year wilderness wandering, I want to pass through Edom on the King's Highway to their territory. The Edomites said, you're not going to do it. In fact, they came out with their army to stop them. But God would not let Israel do anything to the Edomites. Deuteronomy 2:5. There's another passage in Deuteronomy that talks about the Edomite is their brother, and they're not to be abhorred, and they are to be welcomed into the tabernacle or the place of worship in the third generation. Now, there's conflict between Israel and Edom all through the books of Samuel, Kings, and Chronicles. Probably the conflict revolved more around trade than anything else. They controlled the King's Highway. The trade routes went through this area. So that made, a tense situation. So Saul had conflict with them in 1 Samuel 14. David conquered them. Solomon exploited that conquest in 1 Kings 11, 14 through 22. That's where he had his copper mines. That's where he had his access to the sea. Jehoram lost control of them. It was regained in 2 Kings 8, 20 through 22, 2 Chronicles 21, 8. And Ahaz also lost some control of with the Edomites. There's only one time that I can find in the book of Kings, 2 Kings chapter 3, where the Edomites, the Israelites, and Judaites, the ones from Judah, worked together. And that was in their conflict against the king of Moab. 2 Kings chapter 3. So, this is the history of the brothers and of the nations. The problem has become that when Jerusalem was invaded, the Edomites looked on first, then they robbed, and then anybody that escaped from the territories of Judah, they captured them. They either robbed them, killed them, or sold them as slaves, or gave them to the invaders. So this is why the harsh judgment in this book. And it starts in about verse 10. But let's look at some things that are mentioned in verses 5 through 9. We already said that they were proud of their location. Proud of their location. It was easily defended. They could, they resided above. But they were also known for their wisdom. And if you know the book of Job, Eliphaz the Temanite was from Edom, apparently. They were known for their wisdom. They had a impressive army for a nation their size, and they were proud of this. And as traders and their location, they were also kind of bankers. They had treasuries. And they made alliances because of the trade agreements that they had. The Nabateans will be their undoing, but they had an alliance with them because of trade. So, this is what's going on in verses 5 through 9. So, if thieves came to you, if plunderers by the night, how have you been destroyed? Would they not steal only what they wanted? If grape gatherers came to you, would they not leave gleanings? How Esau has been pillaged, his treasures searched out. All your allies have deceived you. They have driven you to the border. Your confederates have prevailed against you. Those who ate your bread set a trap for you. There is no understanding of it. On that day, says the Lord, I will destroy the wise out of Edom and understanding out of Mount Esau. You warriors shall be shattered, O Teman, so that everyone from Mount Esau will be cut off. So, again, they're driven from their land by the Nabateans. The Nabateans were their partners in business. This occurred around 312 BC. Under Judas Maccabees, well, let's back up a little bit. In the next section, it talks about their cruelty toward the Israelites. So, when Israel was invaded, and we're going to talk about it from the point of view of being invaded by the Babylonians, and the temple and Jerusalem were being destroyed, the Edomites had an alliance with the Babylonians. Now, a few years later, this alliance will break down and the Babylonians will punish the Edomites. But to begin with, when they were saying, raise it, tear it down, when they were capturing Jews that were fugitives, they were with the Babylonians to a degree. Then they were driven from their own land. They settled south of Judah. Judas Maccabeus began the subjugation of the Edomites in 166 BC. And then John Hyrcanus completed this by forcing them to become circumcised and become Jews. And at that time, the territory became known as Idumea. And this is where you get the Herods from. Herod the Great, Herod Antipas, Herod Philip, Herod Agrippa I, Herod Agrippa II. They were basically had a heritage with the Edomites. Again, in history, in AD 60 through 70, they are with the Jews for the rebellion in AD 70. But when the war is over, the Edomites, or the Idumeans, are no more. The Israelites still exist. So, we come to verse 15. Verse 15. And this is a hinge verse. All along, we've been talking about judgment on Edom. There's a change here. It's a judgment on all the nations. The day of the Lord is near against all nations. As you have done, so it shall be done to you. Your deeds shall return on your own head. For as you have drunk on my holy mountain, all the nations around you shall drink. They shall drink and gulp down, and shall be as though they had never been. The Bible Project, in their little video on Obadiah, made an interesting point that in Hebrew, I don't read Hebrew, don't even pretend to, but that the same letters for Edom and Adam are the same. So that when there's a word play here. So when he's talking about judgment on Edom, it becomes representative for judgment on all the nations, all the world. And this concept, the day of the Lord, it's God's intervention in history. God's intervention in history. There are the smaller days of the Lord, and there is the great day of the Lord. Does that make sense? The smaller days of the Lord is judgment on nations, such as what happened to Israel and Judah, what happens to Edom in the book of Obadiah, what is called for in the book of Amos against the various nations. And that is a judgment from God that comes through other nations. The great day of the Lord is when God intervenes in history personally. One fulfillment of that great day of the Lord is when Jesus came. God entered history. A greater fulfillment of the day of the Lord. And if you look at 1 Thessalonians 5:2, 2 Thessalonians 2:1 and 2, and 1 Peter 3:10, it's the great day of the Lord when the Christ returns. Does that make sense? So, it's not just his judgment on the nations. It's the complete setting of everything right. So, in the last part of this book, Israel, Judah, is regathered from their exile. They're regathered from their exile. But Edom ceases to exist. And we already talked about that to a degree. So, what are some things that we can learn for ourselves from? First of all, I guess I should ask, do you have any observations or points that you want to point out from any of the passages of the book of Obadiah?
You can take this one story and apply it to every great nation that has risen and fallen. To me, it sort of points forward the idea that you become successful in earthly ways and you forget godly ways.
Very good point. Yeah, very good point. Chris pointed out that how that a nation becomes successful and in the process forgets God, and we may say they take pride in what they've accomplished. So Edom, let's look at this for Edom. They were proud of their location in the mountains high above, had a narrow pass in, easily defended. They thought, nobody can bring me down. Nobody can bring me down. So, pride.
Sons of pride, I think we see in here that they received God's judgment because of violence against Israel. But basically the way they treated or mistreated one another.
Right. Violence against Israel. So let's continue on with their pride. They had pride in their location. They had pride in their wisdom. They had pride in their military. They had pride in the treasures that they had, their natural resources. They were known for producing their wines and sheep and self-reliant. So pride, and then with that, one of the commentators I was looking at said, invulnerability of nations is a delusion. Think about what that says. Invulnerability of nations is a delusion. They thought, because of alliances, location, wisdom, they were secure. So, do we have the same problem? And Chris pointed that out, I think. Do we have the same problem? Jim was telling me a few weeks ago about a plane that we were developing and the cost. A weapon system. Invulnerability of nations is a delusion. Pride gets people in trouble.
Pride goes toward destruction, and the Holy Spirit will fall. It's always been that.
Yeah.
We get to thinking we know what God is thinking, or think we get certain things, and it don't happen. It always brings destruction. Power and pride gets in the way. We see it today throughout nations.
Yep.
It's the beginning of destruction.
It's the beginning. Pride goes before the fall. Proverbs 16-18. So Roger pointed out that cruelty was another thing. Now, I want to ask a question. Why was Israel, Judah, in trouble? Idol worship. So, in a sense, didn't they bring their trouble on themselves? Now, a question. So, wasn't Edom by aiding the Babylonians? Really aiding God?
God used many nations to punish Israel, but then he dealt with all nations later. So.
True. But do we have a responsibility to help people who have brought disaster on themselves? Apparently so. Apparently so.
You stated earlier, we all came to battle.
Absolutely. And I think that was a good point in that video.
The word Adam means humanity.
Yeah. So all humans have at some point screwed up. Some of them worse than others. But we still have a responsibility, at least not to profit by their screw ups. Okay? Or not maliciously prosper by their screw ups. This is a rebuke to anyone who enjoys seeing the downfall of others, even if they are your enemies. Does that make sense? And then emphasize the day of the Lord again. And notice this last, I'm not sure it's the last verse. Yeah, it is in the last verse. Those who have been saved shall go up to Mount Zion to rule Mount Esau, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Fast forward to Revelation 11, verse 15. What does that say? I think I got the verse right. I should look it up, I guess.
The kingdom of the world is become the kingdom of the Lord.
Lord and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. So, again, a recap. Edom's destruction is announced. The Lord announced it. The reason was his pride and his cruelty toward the Jews or the Israelites. His destruction is complete. The nation's destruction is complete. Israel will be restored. Edom will be forgotten. Disappear from history. the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Questions, comments, answers? Okay, I'm finished.
You say